The sanctuary in the book of Revelation.
Svetišče v knjigi Razodetje.
We were talking about that in the previous hour.
Govorili smo o tem prejšnjo uro,
But now I want to finish the topic.
zdaj bi pa dokončal to temo.
And the sanctuary covers the big picture of salvation.
Razodetje pokriva veliko sliko načrta o zveličanju.
Everything that God is doing for us on heaven and on earth.
In sicer vse, kar Bog dela za nas v nebesih in tudi na zemlji.
But before we do that, another quick tour of Patmos.
Ampak predtem še ena hitra tura po Patmosu.
Remember, we are looking for John's motorcycle. Yeah?
Spomnite se, iščemo Janezov motocikl.
It would be hard to see here because this is Patmos from outer space.
Od tuga je težko prepoznati, ker to je Patmos slikan iz vesolja.
It looks a little bit like a seahorse.
Malo spominja na morskega konjička.
And right in the middle is the main harbor of the island.
Na sredi se vidi glavna luka,
And the main city is around that harbor.
oziroma pristanišče in tudi glavno mesto, mestece na otoku se
So
tudi tu nahaja.
there is the harbor.
Torej tukaj je pristanišče.
This is the mountain where you have the monastery.
Tukaj je gora, na kateri je samostan,
So it's the highest point on the island.
najvišja točka na otoku.
And then right about here is where John is thought to have been when he received the vision.
In tukaj bi bilo mesto, kraj, kjer je baje Janez imel videnje.
It's a place right there called the cave of the apocalypse.
In ta kraj se imenuje jama Razodetja.
A lot of New Testament people like to live in caves, apparently.
Očitno je veliko novozaveznih oseb radi živelo v jamah.
Many people don't know this.
Veliko ljudi pa spet tega ne ve.
But there's no evidence for a city in Nazareth in the first century.
Namreč ne obstaja noben dokaz, da je obstajalo mesto Nazaret v prvem stoletju.
There are no remnants of inhabited buildings in Nazareth.
Ne obstajajo nobeni ostanki naseljenih stavb v mestu Nazaret oziroma kraju Nazaret.
But there's evidence for 400 inhabited caves.
Obstajajo pa dokazi o 400 naseljenih jamah, ali se reče tako, jama.
And you can see
votlina.
these caves if you go to Israel
In če boste šli v Izrael, si boste lahko gledali te votline,
and
jame.
get special permission to go underneath the ancient church.
Sicer je potrebno posebno dovoljenje za dostop pod starodavno cerkev.
Most tours don't do this, but you'll have to ask for it when you go next year.
Večina vodnikov oziroma tur tega ne počnejo, ampak treba se pozanimati za to.
And so Jesus was a caveman growing up.
Torej, Jezus je bil jamski človek, ko je odraščal.
And so was John while he was in Patmos.
In tako je tudi bil Janez, ko je živel na Patmosu.
That is the harbor looking down from the mountaintop.
Pogled na pristanišče z vrha gore.
What a beautiful place.
Kako lep kraj.
Here you see some of the coastline.
Nekaj delov obale.
And of course, it's a good place for vacation.
In to je vsekakor tudi čudovit kraj za počitnice.
This is the nicest hotel on the island.
Najlepši hotel na otoku
The swimming pool.
z bazenom.
And once again, the bougainvillea.
In Bougainvillea.
Yeah. It's like a vine that has beautiful leaves.
Pač ta rastlina, ki jo mi moški ne poznamo.
So we noticed the structure of Revelation last time.
Prej smo si ogledali strukturo Razodetja.
A series of 7 visions
Niz 7 videnj,
with 7 introductions.
7 uvodi.
And each of these 7 introductions reflects something about the sanctuary.
In vsak od teh uvodov govori nekaj, odraža nekaj od svetišča.
So these texts on the left side are the most important sanctuary texts in the book of Revelation.
Torej, besedila, ki so na levi strani našteta, so najpomembnejša svetišna besedila v Razodetju.
The key idea of the first one is the idea that the church is a temple of God.
Ključna ideja prvega besedila je, da je cerkev Božji tempelj.
And we will keep coming back to this chart, if you want to write it down, as we develop these ideas.
Torej, če se želite to zapisati, bomo se še nazaj vračali in ponovno kazali ta diagram.
Let's go to chapters 4 and 5.
Gremo na 4. in 5. poglavje.
Chapters 4 and 5 have the largest number of sanctuary images anywhere in the book of Revelation.
4. in 5. poglavje imata največ podob, prispodob s svetišnim jezikom v celotni knjigi Razodetja.
For example, it mentions a door into heaven.
Na primer, omenjena so vrata v nebo.
And that same word is used elsewhere in the Bible for the door into the sanctuary.
In ista beseda je tudi drugje v Svetem pismu uporabljena za svetišna vrata, za vrata svetišča.
The reason I have a question mark is I don't know which door.
Zakaj sem postavil vprašaj? Zato, ker ne vem, katera vrata.
The sanctuary has 3 doors.
Namreč v svetišču so 3 vrata.
The door into the outer court,
Vhod v zunanje dvorišče,
the door into the first apartment,
vhod v prvi del svetišča
and the door into the most holy place.
in vrata ali vhod v najsvetejše.
So scholars don't know which of the sanctuary doors is in view here.
Tako da učenjaki ne vedo, katera vrata so tu
I think
mišljena.
probably the entry into the holy place.
Smatram, da je najverjetneje beseda o vhodu v sveto.
Because the inner sanctuary represents heaven.
Ker prvo svetišče oziroma notranje svetišče predstavlja nebo.
And John enters through this door into heaven.
In Janez je skozi ta vrata vstopil v nebo.
There's a mention of trumpets.
Omenjene so trobente.
And trumpets were blown in the daily service of the sanctuary.
In trobili so na trobente v času vsakdanje službe v svetišču.
There's mention of the throne of God.
Omenjeno je tudi prestol, Božji prestol je omenjen.
The throne of God in the sanctuary was the ark.
In Božji prestol je bil kovček od zaveze.
So perhaps this recalls the most holy place and the Day of Atonement.
Tako da se to najverjetneje nanaša na it refers to the holy
Perhaps
place.
it refers to the most holy place, you know, the Ark of the Covenant.
Se najverjetneje nanaša na najsvetejše, kjer je kovček od zaveze. Skrinja od zaveze.
Yeah. There are 3 gemstones mentioned in chapter 4.
V 4. poglavju so omenjeni 3 dragulji.
And all of these gemstones are found in the high priest's garments.
Vsi ti dragulji so najdeni tudi, jih najdemo na obleki, na prstniku duhovnika.
There are 24 elders in chapters 4 and 5.
24 starešin je omenjenih.
And there are 24 divisions of priests in the Old Testament sanctuary.
In 24 redov duhovnikov v starozaveznem svetišču.
Lampstands are mentioned again in chapter 4.
V 4. poglavju je svečnik omenjen.
You also have the Sea of Glass.
In je potem omenjeno stekleno morje.
And the laver in Solomon's temple was called a sea.
In umivalnik je v Salomonovem templju imenovan morje.
So this may be a connection with the laver.
Tako da je to lahko povezava z umivalnikom.
There's still more.
In še je tega.
The 4 cherubim are the angels that surround the throne of God in the most holy place.
4 kerubimi so obkrožali, obdajali Božji prestol v najsvetejšem.
A calf is mentioned in relation to one of these.
Tele je omenjeno v povezavi s tem.
And in Leviticus, the sin offering was with a calf.
In v 3. Mojzisovi je žrtev za greh omenjena kot tele.
Isaiah 6 is reflected here, which is a sanctuary passage.
In je to tudi navedek oziroma namig na Izaija 6. poglavje, ki je tudi opis oziroma uporaba jezika svetišča.
The lamb that is slain, of course, reminds us of the daily service.
In potem jagnje, ki je zaklano, kar nas spominja na vsakdanjo službo.
And then it mentions the horns of the lamb.
In ravno tako so omenjeni jagnjetovi rogovi.
And there were many horns on the altars in the sanctuary.
In na oltarjih v svetišču je bilo veliko rogov.
There's a mention of incense.
Omenjeno je kadilo.
And also of priests who minister the incense.
Se nanaša na duhovnike, ki so prinašali to kadilo.
So what do we do with all that?
Kaj z vsem tem?
You have so many different mentions of different things in the sanctuary.
Tako veliko različnih obemb, različnih stvari iz svetišča.
There's no greater variety of sanctuary images in Revelation than right here in this text.
In v celotni knjigi Razodetja ni večje raznolikosti jezika iz svetišča, kot je v tem besedilu.
So we could ask the question, in what occasions is the entire sanctuary being involved?
In se zastavlja vprašanje, ob kateri priliki se sedaj tu omenja svetišče.
There were two occasions where the whole sanctuary is involved.
Ob dveh prilikah je celotno svetišče bilo udeleženo.
One of these is the inauguration of the sanctuary.
Prvi primer je inauguracija ali posvetitev svetišča.
In Exodus chapter 40, Moses' tabernacle was dedicated.
V drugem Mojzesovi 40. poglavju je opisano, kako je Mojzesov šotor bil posvečen.
And in 1 Kings chapter 6, Solomon's temple was dedicated.
In which
1 Kings chapter 6.
Prvi knjigi Kraljev 6. poglavju pa je Salomonov tempelj vpeljan v službo.
And so in this inauguration service, every part of the temple was dedicated.
Med to službo posvetitve je vsak kraj, vsak del svetišča bil posvečen.
The second service that involved every aspect of the sanctuary.
Druga služba, ki je zajemala vsak aspekt ali vidik svetišča,
was the Day of Atonement.
Je bil dan sprave.
Yeah, every part of the sanctuary was involved to some degree in the Day of Atonement.
Vsak del svetišča je na dan sprave bil nekako udeležen.
So it raises the question, which of the two is in view here in Revelation 4 and 5?
In zato se zastavlja vprašanje, katera od teh dveh prilik o kateri je beseda tukaj v tem poglavju Razodetja.
Let's take a look at the evidence.
Oglejmo si dejstva.
But my conclusion is that Revelation 4 and 5 is the inauguration of the sanctuary, not the Day of Atonement.
Moj sklep je, da to, kar piše v Razodetju 4 in 5, je beseda o posvetitvi svetišča in ne o dnevu sprave.
And I think we will see that that's an important distinction to make.
In smatram, da bomo tudi opazili, ugotovili, da je to pomembna razlika.
First of all, the focus of Revelation 4 and 5 is on the cross of Jesus Christ.
Zapazimo še enkrat poudarek 4. in 5. poglavja je na Jezusovem križu.
There's also a focus on the intercession of Jesus Christ, the outcome of his sacrifice for us.
Ravno tako je poudarek na Jezusovi posredniški službi in na tem, kako se ta služba izteka.
There is a complete absence of judgment language.
In v teh poglavjih ne najdemo nobenih elementov jezika, ki bi vseboval sodbo.
If the event taking place in Revelation 5 was the Day of Atonement, you'd expect judgment language.
Namreč, če bi v 5. poglavju bila beseda o dnevu sprave, bi morali upravičeno pričakovati jezik sodbe.
There is also no mention of most holy place or ark or things like that.
Tudi najsvetejše ni omenjeno, ravno tako ne skrinja od zaveze.
If this were the Day of Atonement, you'd expect most holy place and the ark to be mentioned.
Torej, še enkrat, če bi bila beseda v dnevu spravi, bi pričakovali, da sta najsvetejše in skrinja od zaveze omenjeni.
John uses those words in other parts of the book, but not here.
Janez uporablja te besede, izraze, ampak na drugih krajih razodetja, ne tukaj.
He is well aware of these ideas, but doesn't use them here.
Torej, on se popolnoma zaveda, pozna te koncepte, ideje, ampak jih tukaj ne uporablja.
And of course, in a Day of Atonement, the special animal was the goat.
Na dan sprave je posebna žival bila kozel.
But Revelation 5, they don't sing, "Worthy is the goat that was slain."
Vendar v Razodetju 5. poglavju ne slišimo hvalnice ali pesmi vreden je kozel, ki je zaklan.
Instead, the animal sacrificed here is the lamb, which was appropriate to the inauguration service.
Ampak žival, ki je tu omenjena, je jagnje, in to je žival, ki je bila ob posvetitvi svetišča žrtvovana.
So I have come to the conclusion that the sanctuary event that is being described here is the inauguration of the heavenly sanctuary.
Torej sklepam, da dogodek, ki je tu opisan, je posvetitev nebeškega svetišča.
So the key idea of Revelation 4 and 5 is inauguration, dedication, beginnings.
Ključna ideja 4. in 5. poglavja je torej posvetitev, začetek delovanja službe svetišča.
Let's move ahead to Revelation 8, 2 through 6.
Pojdimo naprej na 8. poglavje od 2. do 6. vrstice.
There are a number of sanctuary images in this passage.
Je tudi število svetiščnih podob v tem besedilu.
You have a golden incense altar.
Tam najdemo zlat kadilni oltar,
You have incense.
kadilo,
You have a censer or fire pan for making the incense.
pomagajte mi, tista naprava za kadilnica, hvala,
And you have 7 trumpets.
in 7 trobent.
All of these are appropriate to the idea of intercession.
Vsi ti predmeti ustrezajo ideji posredovanja.
So this is the constant work that Jesus is doing for us every day.
In to, namreč posredovanje, je nenehno delo, ki ga Jezus opravlja vsak dan.
And this work began after the cross.
To delo se je začelo po križu.
So this reflects what he is doing in the heavenly sanctuary for us throughout the Christian era.
In to je odraz tega, kar je Jezus počel v nebeškem svetišču za nas skozi vsa stoletja.
So the key idea of the third sanctuary introduction is intercession.
Ključna ideja tretjega uvodnega besedila je posredovanje.
Let's go to the next one, chapter 11, verse 19.
In stopimo naprej do naslednjega, to je 11. poglavje, 19. vrstica.
There are a number of sanctuary images in Revelation 11:19 as well.
Tudi v tem besedilu 11:19 najdemo številne podobe iz svetišča.
You have the Ark of the Covenant.
In sicer skrinja od zaveze.
So John does know about this.
Torej, Janez ve za skrinjo.
You have the naos,
Imamo tudi naos,
that Greek word for the most holy place.
grška beseda za najsvetejše.
You have the first reference in the book to judgment.
Imamo prvo omembo sodbe
Judgment is mentioned in the very previous verse.
in je omenjena tudi v predhodni vrstici.
So the focus here is on judgment, most holy place, Day of Atonement.
Tu je poudarek na sodbi, dnevu sprave in najsvetejšem.
So the key idea of the fourth sanctuary scene is Day of Atonement or Judgment.
Ključna ideja četrte slike, podobe svetišča je sodba.
Let's go ahead to Revelation 15, 5 to 8.
Pojdemo naprej na Razodetje 15, 5 do 8.
We have, again, many sanctuary images here.
Ponovno vidimo veliko svetiščnih prispodob.
You have the naos once again.
Ponovno naos.
You have white and gold garments like the priestly garments of chapter 1.
Bela in zlata oblačila, duhovniška oblačila.
You have the tabernacle of the testimony, that phrase is there, which is the most holy place in number 17.
Imamo šotor pričevanja, kar je najsvetejše v 4. Mojzesovi 17. poglavju.
And you have inauguration language like that of 1 Kings 8 in particular.
In ravno tako najdemo jezik, ki posnema, ki govori o posvetitvi svetišča.
And the naos is empty during this scene.
Naos je prazen v času te slike.
In other words, this heavenly sanctuary has no one in it.
Z drugimi besedami, v nebeškem svetišču ni nikogar.
So the big idea here is the temple is closing down.
In glavna ideja tega je, da tempelj zapirajo.
It's, as we said, a de-inauguration or a ceasing of temple work.
Lahko bi temu rekli deinauguracija, torej nasprotno od inauguracije, prenehanje delovanja svetišča.
The heavenly sanctuary is closing down.
Nebeško svetišče se zapira.
So the key idea here you could describe as a de-inauguration or as a closing up of the sanctuary.
Lahko bi opisali ključno idejo zapiranje svetišča ali deinauguracija.
The sixth sanctuary scene is in chapter 19.
Šesta svetiščna prispodoba se najde v Razodetju 19. poglavju.
And once again there's a mixture of sanctuary images here.
In ponovno najdemo mešanico slik iz svetišča.
The contents of this scene is very similar to Revelation 4 and 5.
Vsebina te scene je podobna 4. in 5. poglavju.
You have 24 elders.
Recimo 24 starešin.
You have worship going on.
Čaščenje.
A lot of parallels to chapter 5 especially.
Veliko usporednic tudi s 5. poglavjem.
However, there's no reference to the sanctuary or any of its furnishings.
Vendar se nikjer ne omenja svetišče ali karkoli od svetiščnih predmetov.
So in chapters 4 and 5, you have reference to all kinds of sanctuary furnishings.
V 4. in 5. poglavju je veliko omemb svetiščnih predmetov.
But in chapter 19, you have the same scene, but now there's none of that there.
Vendar v 19. poglavju je ista scena, vendar nič od teh svetiščnih predmetov ali pohištva.
So the sanctuary as a structure is absent.
Potem takem je svetišče kot struktura, ga ni več, odsotno je.
But I guess that shouldn't be a surprise.
Ampak to niti ne bi smelo biti tako presenečenje.
Because in the previous scene, it was shutting down.
Ker je v prejšnji sceni svetišče zaprto.
So the key idea of the sixth sanctuary scene is the absence of the sanctuary.
Ključna ideja 6. scene je odsotnost svetišča.
One last one, chapter 21, verses 1 to 8.
In zadnja, 21. poglavje od 1 do 8.
And here the key verse is Revelation 21:3.
Ključna vrstica 21:3.
So perhaps you could read that for us.
In zaslišal sem mogočen glas, ki je prišel od prestola in rekel: Glej, prebivališče Boga med ljudmi. In prebival bo z njimi, oni bodo njegovo ljudstvo in Bog sam bo z njim.
Now here we have the amazing statement that the tabernacle and human beings have been joined together.
Tukaj najdemo čudovito izjavo, da svetišče in Bog se, the
Tabernacle of God is joined together with men.
da se Božje svetišče združuje skupaj z ljudmi.
That it is now with us.
Božje svetišče je sedaj z nami.
And in fact, God himself is with us.
Pravzaprav Bog osebno je z nami.
So the barrier between us and God has been taken away.
Torej, prepreka, ovira med nami in Bogom je odstranjena.
So here are the sanctuary images in chapter 21.
In tu so slike ali prispodobe iz 21. poglavja, prispodobe svetišča.
You have the word tabernacle.
Torej imamo besedo šotor.
The New Jerusalem is also the most holy place.
Potem Novi Jeruzalem je najsvetejše.
Why would I say that?
Zakaj to pravim?
Because the New Jerusalem is a perfect cube.
Novi Jeruzalem je opisan kot popolna kocka.
The length, the width and the height are all the same.
Višina, globina in širina, vsi so enake mere.
There are only two cubes in the entire Bible.
V celotnem Svetem pismu samo dvakrat sta omenjeni kocki.
The New Jerusalem,
Novi Jeruzalem.
and what is the other one?
Most holy.
The most holy place. Yeah,
Najsvetejše.
yeah. The most holy place, the width, the length, the height, all the same.
Najsvetejše je imelo enake mere. Višina, globina, širina istih mer.
So the very shape of the New Jerusalem is an image of the most holy place.
Torej, sama oblika Novega Jeruzalema je prispodoba najsvetejšega.
And the radiance of the city reminds us of the Shekinah glory. The radiance, the splendor, the
Torej,
bright shining.
slava, sijaj mesta, novega mesta, hvala, nas spominja na šekino, na Božjo slavo.
And the stones of the foundation are the stones on the high priest's breastplate.
Kamni temeljni kamni pa so iz istega materiala kot kamni na duhovniški obleki.
So you have here connections between the New Jerusalem and the most holy place.
In ponovno imamo povezavo med Novim Jeruzalemom in najsvetejšim.
The lamb is the light or the lamp of the city.
Jagnje je svetilo ali luč mesta.
And a little bit later it talks about the people of God offering sacrificial service to him there.
In malo kasneje se tudi omenja Božje ljudstvo, kako opravljajo žrtve Bogu v čast.
So in Revelation 1, God is with us spiritually.
V Razodetju, v prvem poglavju, je Bog z nami v duhovnem smislu.
Jesus is among the churches.
Jezus je med cerkvami.
The Shekinah glory is among the churches.
Šekina, slava šekine je med cerkvami ali v cerkvah.
It's here today.
In je tudi sedaj tu.
Because there's a lot more than 2 or 3 of us gathered in his name.
Ker nas je veliko več, kakor 2 ali 3 zbranih v njegovem imenu.
But can you see it?
Toda ali lahko vidite Božjo slavo?
Can you hear it?
Ali jo lahko slišite?
Can you touch it?
Ali jo lahko otipate?
No, it is a spiritual presence.
Ne, ker gre za duhovno navzočnost.
The reality of God's presence is here.
Toda resničnost Božje navzočnosti je tu.
The physical manifestation of the presence is not.
Toda fizična manifestacija njegove navzočnosti ni med nami.
In Revelation 21 and 22, God's presence is literal.
Toda v 21. 22. poglavju je Božja navzočnost dobesedna.
We can see it and experience it.
Lahko jo vidimo, lahko jo izkusimo.
And in both cases, it's on earth.
In v obeh primerih je to na zemlji.
The Shekinah is among us here on the earth now, spiritually.
Šekina je med nami tukaj na zemlji v duhovnem smislu.
And when the New Jerusalem comes down, the Shekinah will be on this earth again.
In ko Nov Jeruzalem pride na zemljo, bo Šekina na zemlji ponovno.
There's also the restoration of Eden.
Ravno tako je omenjena obnova Edena.
And many scholars have felt that the Garden of Eden is a sanctuary.
Mnogi teologi smatrajo, da je Edenski vrt pravzaprav svetišče.
Within the Old Testament, there are connections between the sanctuary and the Garden of Eden.
Ker v Stari zavezi najdemo povezave med svetiščem in Edenskim vrtom.
So all of this is fulfilling Exodus 25 and verse 8.
Vse to pa so izpolnitve iz 2. Mojzesove knjige 25. poglavja.
What is the key principle of the sanctuary?
Kaj je ključno načelo svetišča?
The presence of God with his people.
Božja navzočnost med njegovim ljudstvom.
So in this seventh sanctuary introduction, the key idea is that the city is a temple.
V sedmem uvodnem besedilu je ključna ideja, da je mesto Novi Jeruzalem tempelj.
So you have the church as the temple at the beginning, but now the city is a temple.
Na začetku, v prvem uvodnem besedilu je cerkev tempelj, v tem zadnjem besedilu je Novi Jeruzalem ali mesto tempelj.
Let's come back to Exodus 25, verse 8.
Vrnimo se na 2. Mojzesovo 25. poglavje 8. vrstico.
Perhaps you could read that for us.
Naredi naj mi svetišče, da bom prebival v njihovi sredi.
So what is the purpose of the sanctuary?
Kaj je torej namen svetišča?
It's to provide a place where God can dwell among his people.
Namen je zagotoviti nam mesto, v katerem Bog lahko prebiva s svojim ljudstvom.
Let's do a quick history of the sanctuary from Genesis to Revelation.
Naredimo hiter zgodovinski pregled svetišča od
Genesis to Revelation.
Od prve Mojzesove do Razodetja.
All right, you have first of all the Garden of Eden.
Najprej imamo omenjen Edenski vrt.
Before sin, God and human beings were together in the garden.
Pred grehom sta človek in Bog bili skupaj v Edenskem vrtu.
But what happened?
Toda kaj se je zgodilo?
Sin came in
Greh se je pojavil,
and it separated God and human beings.
urinil se je vmes in ločil Boga in človeka.
So after sin, God and human beings were separated.
Po grehu so Bog in človeška bitja ločeni.
God was inside the garden.
Bog je bil znotraj vrta,
Adam and Eve were outside the garden.
toda Adam in Eva sta bila zunaj vrta.
So sin separates us from God.
Torej greh nas ločuje od Boga.
So what God did at Mount Sinai was to create a place where he could be close to his people.
To, kar je Bog storil na gori Sinaj, je bilo to, da je ustvaril kraj, kjer je lahko bil blizu svojega ljudstva.
The sanctuary is something of a contradiction.
Svetišče je tudi kraj nasproti.
It provides for God to be present with his people.
Prvič ustvarja možnost, da je Bog navzoč svojim ljudstvom,
And it sets up barriers between God and his people.
ampak ravno tako tudi postavlja ovire med Boga in njegovo ljudstvo.
You see, if God just came down as he is, it would destroy us all.
Če bi torej Bog prišel k nam takšen, kakršen je, bi nas vse uničil.
So the sanctuary provides safety for us.
Torej svetišče zagotavlja varnost za nas.
God's presence is not so there that it would destroy us all.
Tako da Božja navzočnost ni v takšni moči navzoča, da bi nas uničila.
So the sanctuary provides a safe place where God can be among his people and they can be preserved.
Svetišče zagotavlja varen kraj, kjer je lahko Bog navzoč.
So God is in the most holy place.
Bog je v najsvetejšem.
There are several layers of barrier, and the human beings are outside the sanctuary court.
Je več plasti ovir in ljudje so zunaj dvorišča.
So the rectangle on the left side of the larger rectangle is the tent that Moses put up.
Torej večji oziroma manjši pravokotnik znotraj večjega je šotor.
And you can see the two apartments with God on the left side in the most holy place.
Vidimo dva dela svetišča, sveto in najsvetejše na levi strani.
And human beings have access to God through representatives, the priests.
Človeška bitja imajo dostop do Boga po posredovanju človeških duhovnikov.
So every day the people have representatives that go into the temple to intercede for them before God.
Vsak dan ljudje imajo predstavnike, ki grejo vsak dan pred Boga.
And once a year, for a few minutes, one human being gets all the way into God's direct presence.
Enkrat na leto pa eno človeško bitje stopi samo za nekaj minut v najsvetejše pred Božjo navzočnost.
So the sanctuary provides access to God, but it is a limited access.
Svetišče zagotavlja dostop do Boga, ampak je ravno tako omejen dostop.
Now we come to Revelation 1.
Ponovno Razodetje, prvo poglavje.
In Revelation 1 we see the church on earth.
V prvem poglavju vidimo cerkev na zemlji.
And God is represented as being in the most holy place.
Bog je predstavljen kot navzoč v najsvetejšem.
But humanity is drawn close to him. The churches are candlesticks.
Človeštvo je pritegnjeno k Bogu in je predstavljeno svečniki.
So the church is represented as being in the holy place right next to God.
In je cerkev predstavljena, kakor da bi bila zraven Boga v svetem.
Because Jesus is in the heavenly sanctuary and yet he's also among the churches.
In Jezus je v nebeškem svetišču in je ravno tako med cerkvami.
So in Jesus Christ we are drawn much closer to God.
Torej v Jezusu ali po Jezusu Kristusu smo se približali Bogu.
Now finally we have in the new earth the completion of this cycle.
Na novi zemlji je zaključek ali je ta cikl je zaključen.
God and humanity are once more together in the same place.
Bog in človeštvo sta ponovno skupaj na enem kraju.
It says that the redeemed will see his face.
In piše, da odrešeni bodo gledali njegov obraz.
Heaven now comes to earth.
Nebesa prihajajo na zemljo.
The heavenly sanctuary and the earthly have become the same.
Nebeško svetišče in zemeljsko svetišče sta postala eno.
The New Jerusalem is the most holy place.
Novi Jeruzalem je najsvetejše.
And the Garden of Eden is now restored.
In Edenski vrt je obnovljen.
With its tree of life.
Z drevesom življenja.
So the end of the book of Revelation fulfills the whole promise of the temple.
Konec knjige Razodetje predstavlja izpolnitev obljub templja.
Jesus Christ himself is the temple.
Jezus Kristus je osebno tempelj.
But the church is the New Jerusalem, which is also the temple.
Cerkev pa je Novi Jeruzalem, ki pa je hkrati tudi tempelj.
So the church and temple ideas are completely united together.
In sta združeni popolnoma.
We will serve him day and night in his temple.
Dan in noč bomo služili v njegovem hramu.
And all of this will happen on earth.
Vse to se bo dogajalo na zemlji.
All right. So let's summarize this pattern of the sanctuary in the book of Revelation.
Povzemimo ta vzorec svetišča v Razodetju.
You have 7 introductory passages.
Imamo 7 uvodnih besedil.
The first one took place on earth.
Prvo se dogaja na zemlji,
The last one also takes place on earth.
zadnje ravno tako na zemlji.
So what do we have in between?
Kaj pa imamo vmes?
We have a history of the heavenly sanctuary.
Imamo zgodovino nebeškega svetišča,
There is an inauguration.
imamo posvetitev svetišča,
And then begins the intercession after the cross of Christ.
potem začetek posredovanja po Jezusovem odhodu z križa,
Then comes a phase of judgment,
potem faza sodbe,
which we know is toward the end of the age.
za kar vemo, da bo na koncu časa.
And then the sanctuary shuts down
Potem se svetišče zapira
and is no longer present.
in ni več navzoče.
So the heavenly sanctuary has a history.
Torej, nebeško svetišče ima svojo zgodovino.
It begins, it does its work, and then it comes to an end.
Začne s svojim delom, opravlja svoje delo in potem tudi pride do konca dela.
We could also look at it from a different perspective.
Lahko si to gledamo tudi iz druge perspektive.
This whole story begins on Patmos.
Cela zgodba se začne na Patmosu.
Then in Revelation 4:1, John ascends up to heaven.
V Razodetju 4:1 se Janez dvigne na nebo.
And the next 5 sanctuary scenes all clearly take place in heaven.
In naslednjih 5 svetiščnih prizorov se popolnoma jasno dogajajo na nebu.
But then in Revelation 21:3, the sanctuary, the New Jerusalem, comes down to earth.
Potem v Razodetju 21. poglavju, 3. vrstici, se svetišče vrača na zemljo.
And then the final scene is right here on earth.
In zadnja scena je tu na zemlji.
So what you have here is a history of the heavenly sanctuary.
To, kar imamo tukaj, je zgodovina nebeškega svetišča.
Now, one accusation that sometimes people make against Adventists
Ena od pripomb, obtožb, ki jo ljudje izrekajo na račun adventistov,
says you have an Old Testament religion.
da pravijo, vi imate starozavezno religijo.
You're ignoring Jesus Christ and the cross.
Namreč zanemarjate Jezusa in križ
You're ignoring the New Testament,
in zanemarjate novo zavezo.
especially the sanctuary teaching. It's all about the Old Testament.
Še posebej ta nauk o svetišču govori samo o stari zavezi.
Well, I trust that now you can see there are 2 major books of the New Testament that are tremendously interested in the sanctuary.
Upam oziroma verjamem, da sedaj vsi vidite, da sta vsaj 2 novozavezni knjigi, two books,
2 books of the New Testament, Hebrews and Revelation.
yes, who do what?
They are very, very interested in the sanctuary, Old Testament sanctuary.
In te 2 knjigi sta zelo zainteresirani za starozavezno svetišče.
And so it is not true that Adventist teaching can only be based on the Old Testament.
Tako da ni res, da je adventistični nauk lahko zasnovan samo na stari zavezi.
But our sanctuary teaching is also supported in the book of Revelation.
Ampak je naš nauk o svetišču tudi podprt s knjigo Razodetja.
You have the 2 great phases of God's work, the intercession and the judgment.
Imamo 2 veliki fazi Jezusovega dela, posredovanje in sodbo.
And these are clearly described in the book of Revelation itself.
In sta jasno opisani v knjigi Razodetje.
There's one last picture before I close.
In zadnja slika, preden zaključim.
Here we have a summary of the structure of the book of Revelation.
Tukaj imamo povzetek strukture knjige Razodetja.
You have 7 visions
Imamo 7 videnj
with a prologue and an epilogue.
z uvodom in zaključkom.
And each of these is connected to the other.
In vsak del te strukture je povezan med sabo.
If you look at the first 8 verses, you'll find that they parallel many things that are said in the last 15 verses.
Če pogledamo uvodne besede, vidimo, da so usporednice zadnjimi vrsticami Razodetja.
So the author has connected these two.
Torej, avtor je povezal ta dva dela.
The 7 churches promise many things that are fulfilled in the New Jerusalem.
7 cerkvam je veliko tega obljubljeno, kar se izpolnjuje v Novem Jeruzalemu.
The 7 seals have many things that are paralleled in chapters 19 and 20.
In 7 pečatov imajo veliko skupnega s stvarmi, ki so menjeni v času milenija.
The 7 trumpets parallel the 7 bowls.
7 trobent so usporedne s 7 čašami.
So what you have here is like a pyramid structure.
Kar vidimo pred seboj je podobno piramidi.
And this is very common in Hebrew ways of thinking.
Kar je zelo navzoče v hebrejskem načinu razmišljanja.
Hebrew poetry often starts in one place, reaches a climax, and then returns where it started.
Hebrejska poezija velikokrat začne, nadaljuje in se konča tam, kjer se je začela.
Now, in the Hebrew way of thinking,
Hebrejski način razmišljanja je takšen.
the key to such a structure is in the center, not at the end.
Ključ za razumevanje te strukture ni na koncu, ampak v sredi.
If you and I were to write a book, we would start it, we would give the body, and then we would conclude it.
Če bi vi in jaz pisali knjigo, bi začeli s pisanjem, nadaljevali misel in zaključili knjigo.
And the point that we would want you to get would be the point at the end.
In ključna misel bi bila podana na koncu knjige.
But that's not the way the Hebrew mindset works.
Toda hebrejski način razmišljanja ni takšen.
To the Hebrew mindset, the key is in the center.
V hebrejskem načinu razmišljanja je ključna misel v središču.
Now, Adventists should not be surprised.
In ne bi smeli biti preveč presenečeni.
Because the key to the book of Revelation is chapters 12, 13, and 14.
Saj ključna poglavja Razodetja so poglavja 12, 13 in 14.
But there's a Roman Catholic scholar who has discovered the same kind of structure in Revelation.
Obstaja rimokatoliški teolog oziroma teologinja, ki je odkrila to strukturo Razodetja.
And she argues that there's a center of the center.
In ona pravi, da obstaja tudi središče središča.
She also sees these chapters as the center of the book.
Ona torej ravno tako vidi ta poglavja kot središče knjige.
But says the key idea of the center is the 3 angels' messages.
Toda na koncu pravi, da je središče središčne misli troangelsko sporočilo.
Now, I think whenever a Catholic is right, it's important to agree with them, don't you?
In smatram, da kadarkoli katoličan ima prav, se treba z njim strinjati, mar ne?
And so I do.
In jaz se strinjam.
But I'd like to suggest one more thing.
Rad bi predlagal še eno stvar.
There's a center of the center of the center.
Obstaja tudi središče središča središča.
And that is Revelation 14, verse 7.
In to je Razodetje 14. poglavje 7. vrstica.
Because 7 times in the book of Revelation, in the center part of Revelation, it talks about worship.
7-krat Razodetje govori v svojem središčnem delu o čaščenju.
And these are about worshiping the dragon, worshiping the beast, worshiping the image of the beast.
Vendar čaščenju zmaja, zveri in podobe, hvala.
So in this part of Revelation, 7 times it mentions worshiping the beast.
7-krat je v tem delu Razodetja omenjeno čaščenje zveri.
That's clearly the central issue of this part of the book is worship.
In zaradi tega je središčna misel tega dela razodetja čaščenje.
There's only one call to worship God.
Toda samo en klic na čaščenje Boga.
Chapter 14, verse 7.
14. poglavje, 7. vrstica.
That makes this the central idea of the whole book.
In to naredi to besedilo za središčno temo, idejo knjige.
Worship the one who made heaven, earth, the sea, and the fountains of waters.
Dajte čast tistemu, ki je ustvaril vse.
Where does that idea come from?
Odkod ta ideja?
It's the fourth commandment.
To je 4. zapoved.
So at the most crucial part of the book, there's a quotation of the fourth commandment.
Torej, v najpomembnejšem, ključnem, središčnem delu knjige je navedek 4. zapovedi.
So that's how a structural study of the book of Revelation enlightens us with its key ideas.
Torej, na takšen način nas lahko študija, proučevanje strukture razodetja lahko navdihne, nam lahko pokaže določene stvari.
Now I'm afraid our time is up. There won't be time for a question right now, but we'll take our break and then we'll have the final presentation in 10 minutes.
Nažalost se nam je iztekel čas, ni sedaj časa za vprašanja, bomo naredili pauzo in nadaljevali kasneje.